Time. Welcome to part two. How many of you are here for part one? Oh, look at that. I guess we didn't successfully scare them away. Well, I guess there's the other half that didn't come back, so welcome back. Quick introductions. So this talk, I should say that, this is part two of Building Your Impact, looking at the Barriers and Bridges Protocol. We are from the Robo-Lancers, Team 321 at Central High School in the School District of Philadelphia. We are the 2023 First Impact Award winner. My name is Michael Johnson. I have been the coach of the Robo-Lancers since 2014, assisting in the heckler and keep me on track role is Isriah, who has been with us since 2021, but has been in first as a student and then as a mentor since he was in kindergarten in 2005. And these slides are now available in a rough and ready page at robolancers.com. It'll be prettier later if we remember.
Writing it down.
So some quick show of hands questions. Whose team does outreach? Whose team has a mission statement? Whose team uses that mission statement to guide their outreach program? That's the bit that we're working on through these sessions today. And how many of you have presented already or plan to present for Impact Award? Okay. So the Impact Award, again, just to remind what this thing is that we're angling for, recognizes a team judged to have the most significant, measurable impact of its partnerships among its participants and community over a sustained period, not just a single build season. The winner is able to demonstrate progress towards first mission of transforming our culture. So I had this same hot take to start with. I think most teams do outreach without impact or with minimal impact. There's not a lot of strategy behind the work, and so the results that they get are meager, or it's hard to point to what that is. And I want to say a little bit more about that this time in the context of the Robo-Lancers journey to the Impact Award. So last year was our 25th season. We had started our impact journey in 2011. For the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years of that work, our sort of headline story was an event called PRX, the Philly Robotics Expo. This was a one-day event that we hosted in partnership with Drexel University, then the University of Pennsylvania. Folks like school groups would come in on field trips. We'd run classes and workshops and robot demos, and the grad students at the host university would do tours of the labs. This was high reach, right? Each year we would get somewhere between 250 and 400 student participants to attend, but low impact. It's not really clear to us what that did for the folks who came. Sure, they had a fun time. Like, it was a fun event. But what was the lasting impact? So Maya here, who's in the front row, came to PRX as a middle school student and then joined her middle school's robotics team, FLL team. She went on to be our team president and impact presenter last year. But that's the only measurable impact that I have, right? So PRX at least, made a difference in one student's trajectory. And there may have been more stories like Maya's, but we don't know what they are. We weren't able to track that. And so when you go to present for Impact Award, you need to be able to measure that impact. And if you can't measure it, you can't present about it. The other thing that's important to know is that planning and running PRX destroyed 1 to 3 of my students every year. It was a just absolute grind in getting that through, and it all goes up in one day, and then whatever's left of that student, maybe you get to see them the next year. We were talking about this in the hallway before, how we were saved by the pandemic. Right? I had been looking for a way to cancel PRX for a while, and then we had a pandemic, and we got to cancel it, and then just not talk about it later. There was no going back. 2016 was the pivot point for the Robo-Lancers. We articulated a much more focused team mission to inspire and prepare the next generation of STEM leaders in Philadelphia. And we responded to a sudden loss of funding for First Tech Challenge teams in our city by founding the nonprofit Philadelphia Robotics Coalition as a vehicle for getting those teams restarted, starting new teams, and having a greater impact. So the sort of thumbnail of our measurable impact that we presented last year. Last year in Philadelphia, we supported 131 official FIRST teams across all FIRST programs, with an additional 50 school-based but not official FIRST teams doing the same thing. 94 of those teams had been started in the previous 3 years with our assistance. Our students logged roughly 5,000 volunteer hours last year, hosted or supported through volunteerism 21 events, and passed $175,000 to teams in the form of grants, and had a total sort of program funding of $300,000. Those are all big numbers that we can point to and share with the judges. Now, as we worked through this journey, we started by, all right, we're doing PRX, we are helping out a couple teams some way, we're presenting and we're not winning the Impact Award. Well, let's look and see what other teams are doing. So we started looking at other teams winning Impact Award presentations and essays and such. We had really minimal success copying what the other teams were doing. So as we started putting together this series of impact trainings for you all, the question is not what did we do in Philadelphia, but how did we build that impact program? What worked for us in Philadelphia is not necessarily going to work for you where you are. So the purpose of this talk is to start to teach the how. How can you assess the community needs and make forward progress? So we have this whole series broken out into 3 pieces. The planning your outreach mission, setting goals, that was our first session, Mission and Vision, which many of you were at. This is now Barriers and Bridges. We're going to look at how to pursue those missions and goals, how to track your progress. This is the part where you're actually having an impact. The third part is that we have to acknowledge that First Impact Award is a competition. Not only do you have to have a good impact, but you have to beat out the other teams who are also doing amazing work. And so our last year's impact presenters the students are presenting their How to Impact talk at 3 p.m. today in a different room, but it's on the schedule. So with that, welcome to Barriers and Bridges. This is a tool. This is the way that the RoboLancers conceptualized and planned out the work that we were doing, and it's also the way that we structured our storytelling in our essay and in our First Impact Award presentation. This session is not about the submission, it's about the work. We'll talk a little bit about what we did in Philadelphia. There will be time for you all to start thinking about barriers and bridges in your own communities. The Barriers and Bridges protocol really turns outreach into a strategic design process, just like you do with the robots. You've got a mission, right? The premise here is that we've already been through the mission and vision, and your team has done the work to build out mission and vision statements that you're excited about. So we have the game manual, like we know what the objectives are. But now we have to figure out how we will design that outreach machine, design that impact machine to have the impact that we're gunning for. The other thing that this does is it helps to keep the team on mission, helps you to work in the right direction. So our first step is to identify barriers. We've established a mission, we've written a vision statement, we've imagined the world as we want it to be. So the first question to ask is, Why, specifically, is that mission not yet achieved? These are the barriers. These are the roadblocks that it will be your job to overcome. Now, I'm going to say this like 5 times. Make sure that you are consulting with all the stakeholders in your community. We called this the audience in the previous talk. To identify those barriers, please do not make assumptions. I will say, especially for the many teams in the last talk were talking about, we want to reach underserved or underprivileged, or fill in the word you're using. You cannot do impact to people. And be cautious of that mindset. This needs to be something that you're doing with the people that you are hoping to serve. For us in Philadelphia, in many ways, our students are the people that we're trying to serve. We are at one school of 200-something schools across the city. So in some ways, we are a part of that community. In other ways, we are not. And we need to be aware of that and make sure that we are working collaboratively with stakeholders across our city. You need to do the same in your area or across your audience, however you have defined that. Now, the most critical barriers will change over time. Sometimes it's because of external factors, like a pandemic, or for us, I said the impetus for the start of our coalition was a federal grant that was funding all of FTC in Philadelphia in 2015, just said, we're not doing that anymore. Bye. It also, and we hope that your barriers change because you have surmounted the previous barrier. And it's going to be an ongoing process, right? This is the barrier, this is the most critical thing that is preventing us from achieving our mission. We are going to get around it, get over it, get through it. And what do we see in front of us? Another barrier, right? It's like waiting in line at Disneyland. You always just get to the next line. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a continuously changing set of barriers. So here are the barriers that we faced in Philadelphia over the last 8 years or so. Funding, team administration and purchasing, dealing with both the first information systems and with the school district purchasing systems. Coach quality, retention, and training. Teams were coming to competition but were totally unprepared to compete when they arrived. We were starting to run team workshops. The attendance was pretty low, and the teams that we thought most needed the workshop were not among the attending teams. We're going to come back and talk about bridges over these later. But before we do that, I want you to start thinking about what are the barriers that are currently blocking your progress towards achieving your mission and achieving your vision. So if you already have a team mission statement, many of you do, pull that up, bring it to the front of your mind. If you don't have a team mission statement, if you go to firstinspires.org/about, look at the first mission and just take that as your example. And I think Isriah grabbed the microphone, so you're going to talk?
I'm going to run around.
Oh, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to brainstorm 3 to 5 barriers that you think are the biggest obstacles to the fulfillment of your mission. Now, first of all, money is on your list. Yes, it is. Great. Ignore. And second, remember that what you think are the most critical barriers, you're probably wrong, and you're going to verify this through conversations with the whole stakeholder community. But let's take 2 minutes silently, and then we will hear out over the mic some of these barriers.
Where did you want to be at this point? 15 minutes. I'm spot on. Thank you.
Great. That's the biggest problem.
to type these or just let people use their own lists? Let's not.
Yeah, it's not good. I'll write, but that won't be on the screen. If you want them for later, we can write. But if not, it's fine.
Okay, I think we just skip it. All right, we are going to do our share out, the same rules from the first session apply, 5-word limit. And which side are we starting on? Should we start over this side? So we're just looking for what barriers are you facing, just one off of your list. What? It's okay? I'm doing okay? Okay. Go ahead.
Misconceptions about robotics.
Misconceptions about robotics. Lack of knowledge about FRC.
Which stakeholders to include?
Which stakeholders to include in the process or in the work? Both, yeah.
Enhancing our culture without losing the robot culture.
Enhancing team culture without losing robot culture.
Varying levels of interest.
Varying levels of interest.
Mine's a combination of the two. Is focus. It's not just a robotics competition.
Focus, it's not just a robotics competition. I'm actually going to pause at the halfway point because I've noticed that a lot of the barriers that I'm hearing sound like barriers to your team winning the Impact Award or working on impact work. Not all of them. And what I'm specifically looking for is barriers to achieving your impact mission.
So can I say something?
Yes.
I'm just going to say our team is woefully ignorant on exactly what you just said. I wrote it in my notes. There it is. I can't answer your question.
Okay.
Stakeholders are helpful.
Well, we got work to do.
Right. And in if we were here all week, we would have a clearly defined outreach mission coming out of the first session, right? And that's easier to look at. And I think also that understanding or that acknowledgement that we don't know what we're doing is an excellent place to start, because what I said before about making assumptions about what that most critical need is can be really damaging, both to the relationships and to the work. So let me try again to frame this and let me know if this is helpful. There are a couple of levels. There's really two, formatting. There's two parts to winning the Impact Award. There's having an impact, and then there's convincing the judges that you had the most, whatever the word is.
Impact? The most impact?
The most impact, sure. The most impact, I was going to say the most impactful impact, but that didn't sound good coming anyway. And what I'm trying to do in this sort of series of talks today is to separate those a little bit. I think if you're starting with how do we convince the judges, well, convince them of what? Last year on the RoboLancers, we had 168 students across 1 FRC and 6 FTC teams. We had 5 adults total. One of those adults was really only focused on the robot. 2 of those adults were really only focused on the impact submission and presentation. And Isriah and I were trying to keep up with everything. I don't recommend that by any means, but I mean to say that the work of having an impact and the work of presenting for the award, one comes before the other. And when I sometimes hear from teams who are like, man, we've been presenting for impact for years and years and years and we still haven't won. I want to hear, well, what's the work that you're doing? What's the impact that you're having, and how has that changed? So the premise of this talk is that a team has an outreach mission, has some mission, some change that they're trying to have in the world. That may or may not be defined for you yet. Once you're at that point, the question is, why isn't that already manifest? Why isn't that already achieved? And what are the barriers preventing our community, however it's been defined, from reaching that? Does that clarify, Craig? Okay. Right, so we're sort of in this intermediate step.
Okay, so I think I have a barrier then. So like, for example, if we want to start more FLL teams, the FLL kids are excited, the school is excited, the high school students are excited, but parents have full-time jobs and like the parents of the FLL kids. So then there's a barrier.
So the barrier for you,
adults to get involved in coaching FLL.
right, so if you have this goal to increase participation in FLL. Sure. So you've said, okay, we want to get more kids involved in first LEGO League. So our goal is to build teams. The kids are in, the schools are in, our kids are in, but we need adult mentors. So there's a barrier that you've identified. Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. Right? The reason that this hasn't happened, the reason that we don't already have 12 FLL teams at every elementary school is because there is not enough adult mentor participation. That's what we're on to. Yes?
And that's what I think when I meant focus is, yes, we're building a robot to compete, but I think we have stakeholders who want to make an impact, and we have stakeholders who just want to go to robot and get a bank. It's merging those two to everybody to get the focus. We can do both of them at the same time without losing,
right, and
what we're here for.
And figuring out how they can complement each other.
Correct.
Michael, you can either choose to completely derail this, which is very much our MO, or timer.
I'm sure the other half of the room has had lovely ideas as well. Moving on.
I helped.
And actually, I did want to go on because I think that I can also help clarify sort of what I'm talking about, by looping the bridges part in. I think it makes it clearer, which is what you said when we were planning it. And I said, no, we should do them separately. Who's keeping score? Okay. So once you have barriers identified, it is time to design a bridge to cross it. This is that design problem we talked about. So let's define first. Bridges are actionable plans. They are not vague notions. You need to think about what resources the community, your audience, already has at its disposal. You should look for what new resources you can either provide as a team or that you can recruit into the effort. Be strategic. Look for low-hanging fruit. The low-effort, high-impact bridges should always be first on the list. And again, I said, I'll repeat myself, be collaborative. Make sure you're working with your audience to design good solutions. So here's the Philadelphia case study, which Isriah said I should have done at the beginning. So 2015, pre-2015, a federal Gear Up for College grant is paying for First Tech Challenge teams in the school district of Philadelphia, paying the coaches, buying the materials and registrations. 2015, they say, oh, the grant still exists, but it's not doing robotics anymore. And overnight, we lost roughly 2/3 of the First Tech Challenge teams in Philadelphia. The ones that lasted, the ones that persisted, were all at the magnet high schools, at the special admit schools that had more resources available outside of that grant. So that funding cut had an inequitable impact on the students of Philadelphia. So our first thought was, okay, these teams stopped competing because they lost their funding. We need to secure funding and get the schools their money. So we got much faster than we expected, got ourselves a 3-year, $25,000 a year grant from the Neubauer Family Foundation, a local philanthropy in Philadelphia. And they said, go, do it. And we wrote $3,000 checks to 6 schools and said, wash our hands, job well done. No, because it turns out that most of the schools couldn't take a $3,000 check and pay the coaches with some of it and buy parts and materials with others of it. Like, I don't know how much of that initial $18,000 that went immediately out the door to those 6 teams ever actually got. I have no idea where it went. Don't tell the Neubauer Family Foundation. And so in the next year, in the 2017-18 school year, we said, okay, somebody from the Philadelphia Robotics Coalition is going to be the team administrator on every team's dashboard. We're going to pay the first registration fees, the event registration fees, buy the kits directly. And if they need to buy other stuff, they're just going to fill out a Google form that says, buy me these servos. And we have the money, we pay it, we ship to their school. So they don't have to navigate the first dashboard, which we all love to hate. The schools don't have to figure out how to purchase from vendors that are not already approved vendors. We're just buying stuff and sending it off. Well, by year 3, we had restarted several of the teams that had existed before and had coaches who had done it before, and more money was coming in. We were trying to start more teams, but we were already seeing that we had a really hard time recruiting, retaining coaches and getting them sort of read into the work. We designed and started running an intensive coach training each August so that new and returning coaches could come in, spend a full day or 2 with us, build an FTC robot, start to build community with each other. And even though Philadelphia has 70-something high schools, they are all their individual islands. We don't communicate or talk to each other. And this was a way to start building those relationships between coaches. In August, you start seeing them again at events through the school year. Also running ongoing coach trainings that has built up along the way. But still, teams were not ready for their competitions. Right, you would still get teams, showing up at a First Tech Challenge qualifier. Here's our kit. We're ready to build the robot. Oh, that's not how this one works. Like, you're supposed to. I mean, that of course is the most egregious example of we did not understand the assignment. But there are lots of smaller ways along, and so we built out a program of monthly team workshops. So in September, right at the start of the school year, is First Tech Challenge kickoff. We've got design it. So you've got your watch the kickoff Q&A with the state first partner, and then we're into a quick design it workshop to start that process. October comes build it. November is program it. December is drive it. January is a scrimmage. February is the qualifier, right? So every month the teams are coming together and are hypothetically progressing through the series of preparation for competition. And those were great, except we noticed that some of the teams that really were most needing that monthly touchpoint help were not attending the workshops. So the question was why? Well, how do we get there? So we started playing with the schedule. Let's have some of these workshops on Saturdays, which is when we traditionally had done them. Let's do other ones on a weekday afternoon, like get them out of school a couple hours early, go into the evening. We have got all of our events located near public transit. When we have to do them someplace else, charter a school bus. Like let's figure out why they're not coming and try to then build the bridge to get the people where they need to be, to get them the resources. all of these that I'm presenting here are in their current form-ish, not their first draft. And these are also the bridges that stuck. It's totally, I would be lying if I said that every barrier we hit, we had a perfect solution that just worked. This is the end result, not the sausage-making process.
Remember that time that we chartered a bus for all the teams and no one took it?
Yes.
That was awesome.
We had a coalition staffer riding back and forth between the subway station and the school with, I think, a total of 4 passengers all day. Doesn't always work. Okay. So with that story of barriers and bridges, checking the time. Okay. This now makes less sense because we didn't really finish barriers, but I want to present the sort of notion of how you do this work, and then we'll have I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A because I think that'll be more productive. So once you've got this list of barriers and you're trying to sort of prioritize what are the barriers that are most significant, then you can start the design process, right? It starts with brainstorming. What are some different bridges that we could build to attack these barriers? And again, we're looking for the low-hanging fruit, the low-effort, high-impact options. And we are working collaboratively with the folks who are going to be receiving this help, receiving these efforts. Make sure, as you're brainstorming, that these bridges are specific and are actionable, and be prepared to work iteratively, to try things. Maybe they work great, you keep doing them. Maybe they don't, you tweak them. Maybe they're terrible and you never charter a bus again. But we as engineers know how to do that. So I guess what I'm asking you to do with barriers and bridges is to apply the engineering design process to your outreach work. What do we need to accomplish? Why haven't we accomplished it yet? And what can we do to get there? The goal then is to be strategic in your work and use that mission statement to keep you focused. Any friction point can be a barrier. Any effort can be seen as a bridge, but be strategic to stay on mission and keep focused on what will have the best impact. I think that this method helps to keep the work focused on the mission and helps you avoid mission creep, where if you're just like, an opportunity comes along, oh, that looks cool, and you go do it all the time, then you look back and you say, oh, we are not actually moving towards the goal that we set out. Make sure that your audience stays engaged in dialogue. This is now the 4th time I'm saying it. Engaged in dialogue about the mission, the barriers, the bridges, so that you've got buy-in and they are partners in this work. Engage with your community and look for available resources. It is much easier to get support, financial support, from individuals or organizations who already are trying to do the work that you're trying to do, like where their missions align, where you can say, oh, I see that your corporate mission is blah, blah, blah. We're trying to do this. And they say, oh, yes, you can do this work for us. Here's a check. Happens more often than you'd expect. Lots of corporations have impact goals of their own, and just as we try to balance allocating resources towards our outreach work versus our technical work, so do the corporations, and if they can just write you a check and you do the work for them, they're on board. Isriah is tapping his wristband, which must mean that I'm about out of time. So, next steps for you. Once you define your team mission and vision, set aside time to work through this barriers and bridges protocol of identifying barriers and designing bridges. Collaborate, focus, come back at 3 p.m. to hear more about the competition portion of the Impact Award, and I will take your questions. And as we do this, Maya's going to stick 2 microphones in your face. One is for the PA and the other is for the recording. The recordings will be published on our YouTube channel, and many people are going to go running in a second for the Dean's List thing. Congratulations and good luck to you all. I am not lucky enough to have one of those ribbons, and so he's got it. So I'm going to be out on the 3rd floor mezzanine and happy to keep chatting as long as you want. But let's do questions. And let's start over here because we ignored them at the beginning.
No, you're staying here.
I'm staying here and Maya's going there? Yes, sir.
What are your suggestions for recruiting coaches or mentors?
So the question is, what are your suggestions for recruiting coaches or mentors? Is this for your team or for teams that you're supporting? Both. Well, I guess I would say, figure out who it is, what sorts of people you want to have as coaches and mentors, and figure out why it is that they aren't already your mentors. Those would be called barriers, and see what you can do to convince them, which is not an answer. The most success I have had in recruiting, I told you we had 5 mentors for 168 kids last year, and we're about triple that this year. And I think what we did was win the Impact Award, and all sorts of people came out of the woodwork. Oh, this team. That's probably not usable advice, though. If you figure it out, let me know.
For our team in particular, we met from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day. Well, 3 days a week. Real people with real jobs who are engineers who want to come onto your team have jobs that end at 5 o'clock. Barrier, time. Bridge, later meetings, triple the mentors. It's that simple sometimes. Like, find a part that is stopping someone and fix that, and then try something else.
Good answer.
Less words.
Less words.
I broke my own rule.
So do you have any examples of what your stakeholder engagement for finding out what those barriers were? Like, what was your stakeholder engagement? What did that look like, maybe? How did you approach that?
So some of this sort of builds off itself. So for example, the August coach trainings have been, for me, the best opportunity to get veteran coaches and new coaches in a room and hear from them what are the challenges that they're facing in their schools. And just as this session took a left turn when I realized that we had not understood each other, and went off sideways, we do the same in that coach training, and the session is sort of built out expecting to make lots of left turns, because I can't pretend to know going in exactly what support folks need. We go. Oh, sorry. Yep.
So you mentioned progress monitoring with measuring your impact. So I guess I'm wondering, do you measure your impact against your outreach mission statement, or is it for each different barrier that you're trying to address, or what do some of those things look like, I guess?
So the question is, are we measuring impact against the mission statement or against each individual barrier? And I would say both. It's much easier to measure against individual barriers. Mission statements are usually very broad and therefore hard to measure directly. But when you identify barriers that are standing in the way of achieving the larger mission, it's much more specific and granular and easier to say, oh, these teams didn't have funding, now they do. These kids didn't get to workshops, now they are, right? So you can then, and that's why we use the barriers and bridges format for our essay and presentation as well, because it was a storytelling tool for us. We saw this issue, like this is our mission. We saw this issue. This is what we did to overcome it. But then there was a new issue, and this is what we did to overcome it. But then there was you get the idea.
Two things. 5-minute warning. Do we want to try like kind of rapid fire?
Okay. What you mean is I should be brief.
I would never accuse you of being overly verbose. That's ridiculous, but maybe go.
I'm going to accuse both of you.
Go, 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 go.
Yeah, we're not using microphones anymore. Say your question, we're repeating. Ask your question.
I wanted to ask, how is your like outreach and awards team structured? Do you have like a dedicated group of people for that, or is everybody like kind of doing a little bit of all the outreach and award?
Understood. Our whole team is involved in outreach. This is relatively new. Starting last year, every student had a 30 hours a year outreach requirement. The award planning, though, is not. So we had a group of 5 students who were involved in crafting the impact essay submission presentation. And again, in my mind, the impact work and the impact award are somewhat separate.
Kind of piggybacking off something you said, one of the barriers for my team is we cannot get students to go to outreach events even if we make it a requirement, and our coaches are very loose about it. How do you excite those kids about going to impact or outreach events?
Your team, the students and the mentors, need to agree on team values and team mission. If there's no buy-in, then you're still back at step 1. And that's one answer. The other answer is doing this is fun, right? Going out and working with other people, other teams, volunteering at events is a ton of fun. We set a 30-hour requirement and find that many of our students are well over 100. It became part of our team culture. Last year when we implemented that requirement, a bunch of our seniors were grumpy about it, but then they graduated and now everybody's happy.
How do you sustain these bridges with student leaders always be switching around?
How do you sustain these bridges as the student leadership is always moving through? 2 answers. The bridges and barriers will change. This is a living process. And so new people can be involved in this work of what are the barriers preventing us from achieving our mission, how do we overcome them? And that can be changing work. The other thing is I will definitely acknowledge that one of the things that we got in founding the Robotics Coalition, the Philadelphia Robotics Coalition, which is a semi-separate entity, is we got continuity of a professional staff driving it. So both ways. Yes, in the back. Oh, go ahead.
Well, my question was kind of going to build off that. How do you prioritize what barriers you're going to attack? Basically, I mean, as a team, there's an infinite number of things that you could work on. All good. How do you focus on what you do?
So the question is, how do we pick which of these barriers to attack? How do we focus the work? We're looking at our mission, and we're focusing on what is the work that's going to further that mission. We're looking at this menu of barriers, and we're trying to figure out which are the most daunting for preventing the achievement of the mission, and also which are the easiest to overcome. And I would say we're thinking of outreach now and impact as an engineering design process. And just as with your robot design, engineering is always a trade-off, and you have to make decisions and commit to this and ignore that and look for a mix of decisions that has the greatest impact.
I'm cutting you off. We have 30 seconds. It's time to not get yelled at by the volunteers because I don't want to get yelled at. As with the last talk, we want to keep talking. Michael will talk forever if you let him. Please follow us to the hallway, but not that way, because the volunteers will only walk that way. You have to walk around the room and then sit there and talk.
Okay.
Yeah?
Sure.
There we go. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yes.
For like barriers and finding them, is it good if they're not